Check 1, 2.
Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need, get over the fear, and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
I love to talk real estate, and I love to talk real estate with people that have such vast experience as you do.
I just love it. I don't think there's a better profession you can have out there than becoming a real estate investor. You get to be in control of what you want to do, where you want to do it. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're short or tall, skinny or not skinny, or guy, gal, anything. You can go out and buy a house, and you can buy it all kinds of different ways. That's the cool part about it. You know, there's not a lot of limits. The only person that limits us is ourselves. So I sit here as a real estate investor. I'm a California broker as well. I did get my broker's license because I was doing some building. I also got my general building contractor's license. So I thoroughly understand dirt and what to do with it and how to make money and how to flip it. I'm not a wholesaler. And I'm not a passive income earner. I'm absolutely someone who buys property and sells it for profit. And I enjoy it.
Okay, so you're primarily then fix and flip.
I am actually, in majority of my transactions, I would say, have been fix and flips. Okay. I've graduated myself to where now all I do is buy and sell. And I buy at a reduced value and I sell at 100% of value. So I'm not a wholesaler and I'm not an assigner. Some people have coined the term and called it hoteling, but that's what I do. So I don't look at ARV, I just look at the as-is value.
Well, negotiation, and, you know, everybody has a different idea of what that is. Some people think it's, you know, just hammering somebody into submission, but I found that it's, for most people, negotiation is more of a conversation. And it's really a tough part of the process, especially for a brand new investor. And it can even be tough for an experienced investor. You know, folks will spend a lot of money, hundreds of dollars, and in some cases thousands of dollars or more on marketing to get the phone ring. And then what often happens is one of three things. They may not even answer the phone. They just let it roll over and never call them back. If they do answer the phone, they'll run out and look at every property without doing any pre-screening really at all, or they'll get to the property and they have no idea how to approach making an offer or how to begin the negotiation process. So all that marketing they did, like through your company, then the lead is just lost. So I wanted to start out, for me, I think it kind of all goes back to the beginning. When you take those initial calls, and I like to call managing the seller's expectations to a certain degree. So tell me how you handle that process when you get on the phone.
Well, and let me start by saying what I do may not be what everybody should do. And what I mean by that is, you know, if I was relatively new in the investment business or brand new in the investment business, I would do things maybe a little bit differently because I wouldn't have systems in place that I could adhere to. And so in my case, I actually have a staff member who answers the phone, and she's trained to ask 5 questions. And if we can get through those 5 questions, then she can ask the remainder of the questions. And so, you know, and the questions are pretty simple. And I think they're probably the 5 most important ones. And in the old days, when as I started out, I tried to figure out how I wanted to do things in life as from a real estate investment perspective and communicating with the seller. We had, you know, long 46 questionnaires. We had, you know, 20 questionnaires, and I've put it all the way down to the 5 key components that I want to know. And the first question is how did you find me?
Okay.
Because I want to know what marketing dollar is performing for me and how it's performing. So if everybody says I'm finding you because of radio, or I'm finding you because of a bandit sign, or I'm finding you because of a yellow letter or a postcard or a typed letter, whatever it is, I need to know that. And it's easier for me to know that or get that information with the first question. If I'm only doing something, I don't ask that question. So if I'm only doing bandit signs, then it's a useless question. But if I'm doing multiple marketing strategies, then I need to know. The second question is, and it's a strange one for me to put my head around, and when I started using it, is actually asking the seller if they had a house to sell. A lot of sellers will call us because they're a prospect, we've marketed to them because in my case, I market to people that have a strong equity base, single family houses, 1 to 3 bedrooms. So they'll call me and want to know why I want to buy their house, or they'll have a question about maybe the marketing piece that they received in the mail, but they don't have any intention of selling a house. So rather than us spending a bucket load of time talking to people who won't sell us a house and possibly spoil a relationship when they're ready to sell, so that's the worst thing I can do, is actually get them frustrated with me, and then when they're ready to sell, they don't want to call me back because of an experience in the past. Well, this way, I ask them if they have a house to sell. If they do not have one, and a certain percentage of people will say, no, I don't, or they'll say things like, I wasn't planning on, but I received your letter. Well, I learned that a motivated person's ready.
Okay.
They want to sell a house. They'll tell you, I want to sell my house. If they don't, we get them off the phone by asking them to call us back when they're ready to sell. If they do, we ask them the second or the third question, which is it listed with a real estate professional? We don't want to interfere with a real estate agent or realtor or broker. Their listing, and I won't buy it from the MLS through the broker. And so I'll just step away. I won't even at this point ask them to call me back when the house is unlisted. I don't want to interfere with the brokers that are out there. Myself being a broker, I'm going to put my properties on the MLS to sell, and I want a good, strong working relationship. Third question is I ask them what they think it's worth in today's marketplace. They give me an answer. I can ask them the next question. If they don't give me an answer, I ask them to go find out, which is sometimes a little harsh sounding. But I learned over the years that if someone, like if I wanted to sell my bike that I have in my garage, if I wanted to sell it, I would know what I would want for it. It's if someone came, was walking by and hey, do you want to sell your bike? At that question, I wouldn't know what I would want. But if I initiated the conversation, I would know what I wanted for my bike first before I did that. So if they don't have an answer for me, I ask them to, talk to a realtor, go to some open houses, compare their property to those houses that they're looking at or what the information they've received from a broker. And I don't mind referring them to a broker because I know the people that I buy from typically won't use a broker. Whatever it is about their house or their what's happening emotionally with them, they either don't have the time or they don't want to deal with the professional realtor that's out there. So I don't mind sending them that direction because if they wanted to go that direction, I couldn't stop them. So let them go. If they know their answer, then I ask them the next question, which is how much were they hoping to sell it for in today's market? That number has to be less than the previous question of how much they think it's worth. It only has to be less than. So if someone's, and we've had it, I've talked to people on the phone and I've asked them how much they think it's worth, and they said 400, and I asked them how much they want to sell it for, and they said 500. Well, there's no reason to continue talking to someone that has an overvalued property.
Exactly.
So we end the call if they're overvalued or in fantasy land, if they're in reality land. And for me, what I do today and what I did yesterday, and yesterday being just a couple years ago, it's a little different. Yet, a couple years ago, I would take the person who said, my house is worth 400, I want 400, and I would go out there and make a presentation. And through negotiation, we would arrive at a number that was satisfactory for both parties. I do it a little bit different today in that I don't make offers to sellers. I ask them to make me the offer, which still is negotiation because you can't come out and just say to a seller, make me an offer, because that sounds rude. But at this point in my career, I never make that first number to the seller. And if a seller asks me, what'd you have in mind? I have an objection handler for that, and I put it right back into their lap to give me a number. And if they can give me enough number low enough, then I'll go out and buy a house. So I've taken the steps a little bit. I've condensed them over what we used to do and what most people will do today. So I think a lot of investors, which is okay, a lot of investors want to be busy and they haven't gotten over or haven't gotten to the thought process that just because you're busy doesn't mean you're profitable. I would rather enjoy my life and buy the same amount of houses than being real busy, not buying a lot of the houses that I looked at, and only buying the ones that are motivated. Because, we can't create motivation. I mean, I can't, or reasonable motivation. I know if I go to a person and they have a $400,000 house and I offer them $4 million, I could probably create motivation for them to sell it to me.
Yeah.
But if they don't have it, they don't have it, and there's nothing I can do about it. So we got to find the motivation, and from that, then we can go out. I go out and buy a house, and then
Okay.
when I go out there, there's steps that I go through um, to make it pleasant for everybody, and because a lot of the sellers are so nervous about selling their house because they don't know what they don't know. They know that
Mhm.
they don't want to use a real estate professional, but they don't know, who I am. They've never met me before. I'm a stranger. They're typically uncomfortable and with people around, new people around them. They're not the life of the party kind of people. And so we have to understand all that. And so when we go out there, we kind of have to, at least I do anyway, I believe I have to help them help themselves.
Mhm. That's a good way to put it.
And because I learned a long time ago that sellers will ask us questions not for the answer, but for the fact of asking the question. They don't want to because they don't want
Mhm.
to feel like they don't know anything. So they'll ask a question that has nothing to do with what we're trying to accomplish. It has
Mhm.
something to do with real estate, but they'll just ask it because they want to be at our level of understanding real estate transactions. And we have to allow them to, and we have to let them be who they are and not dismiss what things are important to them. And if someone asks me a question that's out in left field, has nothing to do with the real estate question, and if I have an answer, I will tell them, and I'll direct the conversation back to buying their house. If I don't have an
Mhm.
answer, I'll let them know that was a great question. After I buy your house today, I will go back and I'll actually research that and give you an answer. And that's an easy, very easy way to take someone who is asking a question that really doesn't have a reason for being asked and get right back to the contract and negotiation that's at hand. And when I tell them that's a great question after I buy your house today, which is after I buy your house today is an embedded command. And they're starting to let them know that that's why I'm there. I don't go out to houses to look at them.
Mhm.
I'm not an appraiser, so I don't appraise them. Always make sure everybody knows that I'm there to buy a house. And there was a time in my life that I thought I was there to just look at houses, that I thought I was there
Mhm.
to give someone a price opinion. The reality is, all sellers ask it differently. But if someone calls us and asks us to come out and buy the house, that's what we're there for. And
Mhm.
they may ask us to come out and look at it. They may say those words. They may say, "Can you come out and give me a idea of what my house is worth?" Most people won't come out right out and say, "I want to sell my house at 50 cents on the dollar. Can you come out and buy it?" Um,
No, absolutely not.
so I think it's important that we communicate with people and understand why they're saying what they're saying and how it impacts us in that real estate transaction.
Well, now I'm assuming that once you've got asked your first 5 questions, well, let me ask you this. Probably whatever they say to you on the phone is not going to be what you actually buy the house for. I mean, it's been my experience that
Yeah,
you have to go out to the house to get your best price.
right. And there are techniques that I use on the phone, especially in an absentee situation, and that
Mhm.
absentee situation is occupied. So some
Mhm.
some landlords don't want their tenant knowing they're trying to sell the house, or some landlords, they live in Texas but they have a house in my neighborhood or my city, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. Like I can buy a house pretty much anywhere in the United States because of the systems that we have. I
Mhm.
wouldn't suggest anybody doing that until they're comfortable buying houses in their backyard. Um, so I can negotiate over the phone. However, you're correct. That first number that we get is always the Disneyland kind of number, the Christmas number. It's it's if their wish list number. And
Right.
where people are really their personalities are larger or they're different on the phone than they are in person, and we should
Mhm.
understand that. And when I get out to the house, we ask very similar questions. I know what they said over the phone. I know they said they wanted X amount for their house. I'm still going to
Mhm.
ask them
Mhm.
again. They may never, not even remember what they said to me over the phone because they're so nervous about what our conversation's about, or they just threw a number out. And when I get there, even before I create value for what I do, I can still ask that question and get a lower number because in person, people have a harder time being in fantasy land. They get to reality land real
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah, they do. And do you ever use gently to say, what I say sometimes is our business model is to bring everything up to where it's all modern and updated, and all the systems are in, if they need to be replaced, they're already replaced. You don't want to tell them your house is a disaster, but you kind of have to lay it on them that I'm going to have to spend in my case, I'm going to have to, or the person I sell this house to, they're going to have to upgrade everything in this house. So I have to gently lead them right out of fantasy land into the fact that you can update a house for $10,000.
Right.
I have to go down that path at some point.
Now, let me describe my physical self to you just a little bit. So here I am. I'm a guy, and I'm about 6 feet tall, and I shave my head, and I have like a mustache, and sometimes I'll have a goatee, sometimes I won't. I look like that police officer. I don't know if anybody knows, or if you know who Steve. I think it's Steve Austin, who used to be a wrestler, a WWE wrestler kind of thing. Well,
yeah.
I have that body type. I mean, I just look like I could have been a thug if I wanted to do something different. Well, so when I go out to someone and I knock on their door and step back about 6 feet and look up the street so they can become comfortable with me, and when they answer the door, I say, "Thank you for inviting me out to buy your house today. Is where I'm parked okay?" And they say yes or no, and if they say no, I move it, and then we resume that. I agreed. I might give them a business card, and I ask them to walk the house with me. And while they walk the house with me, I have what I come up with, and I call it my ugliest repair worksheet. So, and it has 3 columns. It's ugly, uglier, ugliest. And I start the conversation with them, and we go in the same room. And I have found that some sellers, so I said, no, just go ahead and look around. Well, my negotiation and the presentation process began when I marketed to them, but it's really starting when I'm at that front door. And I can't negotiate with someone that's not with me. So I have learned that if I have a seller who's apprehensive and doesn't want to go through each room with me, I carry a tape measure. So I said, I need to measure the house. Do you mind holding the end of the tape measure? I'm not measuring the house for any other reason except to get that seller with me. So we can look at all of the things that I have to fix. And I've learned that even the most beautiful houses, people will tell you what's wrong with them. So if you have an ugly house, it's not hard. All you have to do is rub a wall, the wall that has a hole in it. You just look back and look at it. Well, they know it has a hole in it. They know that the carpet's rolling, and they know the paint's coming off, and they know the cabinets, doors, one of them's missing, or whatever it is, the sink leaks. Well, by the time we start going through this house with this ugliest worksheet, and there's prices for every piece of the house. So if I go in the bathroom and it needs a new sink, I've asked the seller, is that, because they look at my sheet, they can see it says ugly, uglier, ugliest on it. I said, is that uglier, do you think, or is that ugliest thing you've ever seen? And it set me free when I learned that a seller actually wants to be our friend and talk bad about their house, their own home. And it's a weird thing that people do, but they do. And the moment they start ridiculing their house, the value goes down. And so by the time we're done, we have now an amount that they've agreed to. So if I've marked it down on my sheet, I've actually gotten them to say yes, or acknowledged it at the very least. I'm not marking stuff down without them knowing what I'm marking down, because they have to be within, the scenario of negotiation. I mean, if I kept them out, there's no reason to have me in the room.
Exactly.
So, and let's say, and as an example, and sorry I'm getting long-winded, and cut me off if you want me to stop.
No, you're good.
One of the things I learned a long time ago is to understand the components of a home. And so how do you do that? Well, I learned that, because I'm not a plumber, I'm not going to go out and change a water heater. So how do I know what a water heater costs? Well, I call someone and call it my electrician, and I ask my electrician who he knows as a plumber, and he says, well, I know Billy Bob. So I call Billy Bob, and I let Billy Bob know that John Doe electrician referred me to him and said he was the best plumber in town. And as I start, and there's a whole script I go through, and as I start talking to him, I ask Billy Bob, so what's a water heater cost to get replaced? And Billy Bob will say, well, $1,000. I can get it replaced for about $1,000. I said, so what's the most you can see it ever costing to be replaced? And Billy Bob might say, well, $1,500. Well, as I walk the house with the seller, and I notice that the water heater is all rusted out, and has to be replaced, I let them know that Billy Bob down at Billy Bob's Plumbing said he could fix that water heater and replace it for $1,500. What I learned by using third person or third party expertise in negotiation is if I tell a seller that it's going to cost $1,500, the seller can say, no, it's not, because I'm there. I'm the one that spoke the words, it's going to cost you $1,500 or going to cost me when I buy your house. If I say I had a conversation with Billy Bob's not in the room, and Billy Bob said $1,500, I'm using Billy Bob's expertise, who is actually an expert plumber. And the seller rarely can contradict Billy Bob, who's not in the room. He may not, or she may not like it, but the reality is the seller would have fixed it if they could have, and they've already priced it out anyway. And
they, in most cases,
I mean, they have priced it at Home Depot,
right?
And people will go, well, you can pick one up at Home Depot for $500 or whatever it is. And I said, yeah, and what I've realized about the construction business is the material's a third. Sometimes the labor's a third, and all that other stuff is another third. So yeah, $500 of material would be about $1,500 in total repair costs. And when we shake our head up and down like that makes sense, and yes, 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 the seller's going to start shaking their head up and down. The fact that they're doing that because they're seeing you do it, and it's just something that a person will automatically do when they see someone else doing it. And if you doubt that, when you go out to dinner tonight, start shaking your head at someone that you do not know at a table across from you, and they'll start shaking their head up and down. They just, that's an impulse. So they'll start agreeing with me, and as soon as their body starts agreeing with me, their mind can start agreeing with me. And I'm not lying to the person. I didn't say anything that wasn't factual. Billy Bob actually did say the most he would charge is $1,500. I don't want to use the least he would charge. I may only pay the least he would charge, but I don't want to consider factoring that in as a component. I want to take the highest cost it could cost me, and use that as the number when I look at repair costs. So that's how I do that.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think people will say to me, well, and I do look up the houses on the tax assessor site and do a little bit of my own research. I don't run full comps usually before I go out and look at a house because I kind of know my areas. But people will say to me, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to offer this, and if they don't take it, then they just kind of turn around and walk out the door. And what I've tried to tell people is you have to get them engaged. You have to get them, like you said, invested in the discussion. And then you have to, through whatever method you used, and your method is great, you have to begin to change their expectations of that they're not going to get that fantasy number that they probably know isn't a real number anyway. But you do have to listen to the seller and let them vent and let them have their questions and let them say whatever they want to say. You have to make them feel valued in the process, even if you're not going to come to their price.
Right. Absolutely. And I think one of the key things that I do, and I don't do it at the appointment, but one of the key things I do is after I'm done at the appointment, irrespective of whether or not I've bought the house, I send the seller a questionnaire with a self-addressed stamped envelope folded up inside the envelope that the questionnaire comes in, so they can get it back to me as fast as they can. But I asked the seller how I did. Did I show up on time? Was I polite? Did I explain everything? Was I courteous? Did all those things. If I didn't buy the house, what stopped me? Did, not offering you the right amount stop, kind of thing? And people will actually mail those things back to me. And what I have found is it enlightens me on how to treat people, because when you start having some commonality with those questionnaires that you get back, now okay, I did show up on time, but I wasn't 5 minutes early, or I wasn't 15 minutes early. So now I know that I need to always be 10 minutes early or 15 minutes early, because that's what on time means to a seller. Or they would say, well, maybe you didn't explain subject to when you made that offer, or whatever it was. So now I knew to explain that. But what I really received out of these things is the seller would say, we thought about it, we slept on it. If your price to us was $5,000 more, as an example, we would have taken it. Well, they wouldn't have taken it that night because they hadn't slept on it yet. But now they would take it, but they don't know how to call me back to tell me that. So now I just let them send it back in a letter and fall forward.
That's a great point to make. We used surveys all the time when I had a home inspection company because it was important, like you said, to know if things weren't exactly the way you thought they should be, then how do you perceive they should be? But I don't think you're probably one of the few real estate investors that actually does that, and that's a great tip for folks. And I think if you start getting the feedback all the time that, like if they said, well, Michael, he just seemed too formal, then you would know, okay, I've got to change maybe my posture. Maybe I have to not be so formal when I speak to people. But sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know what the turnoff is.
Right. And it's one of the worst things we can assume is that we buy houses from people like ourselves.
Yes.
Because we don't. I mean, I send out a bucket load of yellow letters and mail. We do millions of pieces of mail. If I got one of my yellow letters in the mail, I would throw it away because I am not the prospect. If I was going to sell my house, I'm a broker. I wouldn't list it myself. I'd hire one of my friends that I know really well, and I'd say, hey, sell my house for me. I would sell it through the MLS. I'm not my candidate. So I can't assume that my candidate thinks like I do. So I have to understand who they are. And the process how I learned how to do that and who they were is I call it a 6-pack, and I do 2 6-packs. So, and it's not alcohol, but when I go out to a house, I get there, I arrive there early, and the house is always like in the middle of a house on each side of it, and then there are 3 houses across the street. So I talk to those 5 neighbors, and I ask those 5 neighbors very pointed questions about the seller, why they think the seller's selling, the neighborhood, things I've noticed about the neighborhood. Anything, and then of course I ask them if they're a seller or a buyer because I might have a house to sell, or they may have a house to sell as well. But I'm starting to understand the neighborhood and the philosophy and the social makeup of the personalities, and I'm not going to judge them. I mean, I learned not to judge people a long time ago, but I still need to know the makeup. What slang words are being used? What's the average education of the neighborhood? Because although I went to college, I'm not the greatest writer in the world, but I can use long, words, and I would never want to do that if I realized that the neighborhood I'm buying a house in is at best a high school graduate neighborhood. So as I start communicating with my seller, who I wouldn't know unless I did all this stuff, I communicate with them at a level that they can understand and, more importantly, hear me. Because unless they can hear me, everything I say won't matter. And then the other 6-pack I do is I interview 3 just solds. So I knock on the house of 3 houses that have just sold and ask those people why they bought in the neighborhood and what was part of the house when they bought it and the amenities and what were some of the concessions from the seller. And then I look at the 3 on the market houses. So I'm looking at what my future competition is going to be, and what amenities are being offered and at what value. Because until I know what buyers want in a house that they're buying that just bought, and until I know what the houses that are being offered have, I don't know how to compare the house I'm going to buy to a value. And one of the mistakes that I've seen some investors make is they rehab these houses for themselves, like they were going to live in it. Well, if the neighborhood has flat panel doors, well, it doesn't need raised panel doors. If it has single pane windows, it doesn't need, and the neighborhood has single pane windows, it doesn't need dual pane windows, kind of stuff. And so I learn a lot when I start interviewing those 11 people. So ultimately, I can knock on the door and buy a house from a seller. Is that taking advantage of a seller? No. It's understanding the social makeup of the neighborhood and the seller. And I think those things are important when we start negotiating with people. Because if they spoke a language that I didn't understand, there would be no way to negotiate with them. Well, if I don't know who they are and what language they speak, I can't negotiate.
So to be clear, before you meet with the seller, you speak to all of these people?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak to 11, but I'm going to try. And because a lot of people aren't going to be home. And do I do it as much as I used to? No, because I know my market really, really, really well. However, it's much like what a realtor would do when they did a BPO, or an appraiser would do when they do an appraisal. They look at other like-type properties and do an association. How does this one compare to this one? What they don't do is they don't do the emotional association or the social association. So they're not understanding. Like, one of the questions I ask a person that lives in the neighborhood is tell me about the neighborhood. I noticed that there's some graffiti down at the end of the block. Is that new, or has it been there a lot? And the neighbors will say, because they don't have anything to lose, because they're not trying to sell, they'll be open and honest. They'll say, yeah, there's some new people that live in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood's gone downhill recently. And in fact, the neighbor around the corner, the police were there the other night, and blah, blah, whatever it is. They'll start just opening up everything about the neighborhood.
Spill.
Yeah. Well, the seller's not going to tell me all these things. The seller's going to paint the picture of everything's perfect. So I can bring it up. So I said, and they're going to see me, by the way. One of the most awkward things for the seller is they're looking out their window. They see me parked. They see me knocking on their neighbor's door. They have no clue what I'm asking. So they can't now, because they don't know what I'm asking, and they don't know what the neighbors are saying, they can lie to me less. And not that people intentionally lie, but there's those little itty bitty things that really aren't the truth. But it's not like this really big lie. It's like the guy or the gal who says, yeah, I'm being transferred, but in reality they're being transferred to prison, not because of a job.
They paint a little bit rosier picture than what is maybe the complete truth.
Right. And I've bought in houses from a lot of people that were like upside down in their personal life. And I don't judge it. I'm not there to, fix them. I'm there to buy a house. And so, but knowing whatever they have, it helps me negotiate with them and set them free.
Well, that's a good point to make, and it's curious that you do that for when you buy houses. Now, if I catch the neighbors out, I can tell they're home, I will definitely do that. But when I really did that, and I would go knock on doors, pretty much like you said, in the immediate area, was when I had rental property, and I did it for exactly the same reason, because the neighbors, they would just spill every last detail.
Right.
And I would always have that conversation under the guise of saying I was looking at the house, I wanted to see, ask about the neighborhood and those sorts of things. But I also would tell them, if you ever have a problem with the tenant I put in this house, here's my card. And they were the first ones to call you when they were having a loud party or, doing anything they shouldn't be doing. They just couldn't wait to rat out your tenant.
Well, that exact reason is why when you see an abandoned property, you should knock on the doors of the neighbors. Because the neighbor knows who the seller is, most likely. One of the neighbors do. That owner's confided in, they have the security guard neighbor somewhere. And, is it hard getting out of our car and knocking on a door of a stranger and disturbing their life and asking them silly questions? It's absolutely difficult. The reality is, however, because it's so difficult, most people won't. And most people won't have the wealth that you would have if you did that.
I think, for me, it's not hard. It's obviously not hard for you, but I can remember the time years ago when maybe when I was just getting started, when I wasn't as sure of myself. And I think the quickest way to get over that is just make yourself get out there and do it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I've been in the MMA ring, I've been in the boxing ring, and I enjoy getting beat up kind of stuff. And I remember the day I didn't have any money to do any kind of marketing, and I wanted to do some stuff. And so I decided I was going to start cold calling. And I remember not being able to do that because it was so hard from a fear perspective. What I learned really fast was that it really wasn't difficult. And when you can master your fear, boy, it makes all the little stuff in life seem really easy. And so you just have to push yourself, have someone push you. And I'm a goal setter, so I like writing down and telling those that I want to have hold me accountable what my goals are, and have them beat me up if I don't take steps to achieve them. And if anybody needs help getting out of the car and knocking on a door, tell someone that is looking at them for their livelihood. Tell your child or your spouse or your life mate that we can't have the things we want because I won't do my job. Well, that's not going to go far.
Yeah, that's not a good answer. So let's talk a little bit about. We've talked about kind of how you get sellers to closer to your number, but let's back up just a step and say you've got a brand new investor and they're on the phone with the seller and they're asking the right questions, but they're, let's say it's in a house that or in a neighborhood where they would really like to buy a house, and they're confident that if they go out there and have a conversation with the seller that they're going to be able to maybe put a deal together. How close do you have to be? Now, I know this is probably a different answer for you, but let's say for a new person, if they can get the seller down on their price and see that they're not really stuck on that imaginary number, how close did they have to be before they go out and look at the house and have that face-to-face conversation? We're talking about a new investor now.
The further away from actual value, the better for a new investor. So that was almost a trick question, because not being a new investor, I know personally that if someone said to me, I have a house that's valued at $100,000 and I want $100,000, I know I could go out there and buy that house for $70,000, which most people would be comfortable at a 30% spread. Because if we can't justify why someone should sell at the value they should sell at, we're never going to get them to sell it. And if we, by accident, get them to sign an agreement, the agreement's going to unwind, because they're going to, call their friend up right after you leave and say, I just sold my house. And the friend's going to say, what'd you sell it for? And they say, well, I sold it for $70,000. And the friend's going to say, well, you're crazy. If the seller can't tell the friend, really, I'm not. I know it's worth 100. He showed me comparable sales where it was actually worth 100. But the nice thing about his program is he's going to pay all the costs. So things like commission, closing fees, transfer taxes, and the really thing for what we really needed, the reason we need to sell is we want to close on the day of our choice. And he's not going to get a home inspection report, so we don't have to deal with the 3-inch book about how bad our house is. We walked the house. We both agreed that it needed $5,500 worth of repairs. I get that. I understand that. But he's also going to buy it for cash, and so it doesn't have to qualify to a new lender. So we don't have to go through, and which is really what we want, because, when we bought the house, it was really tough because the house had to qualify, we had to qualify, and he even explained to us, because he actually is, as an investor, he sells the houses too. And he actually told us there was nothing worse than seeing a deal break down in escrow, especially like a week before you were expecting to move, having all your stuff in boxes, because the buyer couldn't qualify for the loan, or the lender went out of business, or the house didn't qualify for the loan. And I just think that the $70,000 and the security, and he's got to make something. I mean, he's not going to, we'd be unreasonable to think that he's going to come out here and buy our house and give us 100% value and pay for the realtor fees and pay for all the closing costs. He's got to make something. And we thought $7,500 was fine. And, if he can sell it faster, he can sell it faster. We're not going to have holding costs. We're not going to have. And so when you explain it to a seller, all the reasons we're better for them as an option, and allow them to understand it. So it can't be make believe. It can't be you should sell us your house at less value because I wear, plaid socks. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, but if you can just explain that, we're not going to get an inspection, we're not going to have a buyer's home inspection, we're not going to have repair costs, we're not going to have commissions and closing costs and escrow fees and transfer taxes. All we're really going to do is subtract the principal balance on your loan and anything else, if there's any taxes or anything like that, and we're going to subtract that from the sales price, and you can actually have that on the day of your choice. And if you want that next week, we have to work really hard to get it, or you can have it in 6 months. And either one of those, and so you guys kind of just pick the day. And the nice thing about what I do is you guys said you needed to do whatever it is they needed to do. You can actually know that you can do that. And there's such peace of mind knowing that you don't have this ball and chain of whether or not your house is going to sell, or whether or not the realtor that you talk to can actually do what they said they could do. Because we're in the market that you never know what's going to happen. Are there going to be more foreclosures, less foreclosures? Are there going to be major layoffs? We saw in the newspaper last week that so-and-so industry was laying off a bunch of people in town. When I buy your house and when you agree to sell me your house today, you can consider it sold. And when we say those things, it's all negotiation, by the way. That's what you're doing.
It is.
And when you say things like, if I can say to a seller, when I buy your house today, when you sell me your house today, when we agree on our price today, and I can say that 8 times and not make it sound like I'm saying it 8 times in a row, something magical happens to our brain. We start believing it. well, I believe it because I know it's true. I'm going to actually do that. But the seller has to start believing it. They have to know in their mind, you know what this person is saying is reasonable. He's putting my fire out. He's so confident that he's going to do what he's doing. He actually is telling me he's doing it. And I like how that feels because I am so used to living a life where I'm told in a lot of perspectives what to do. And earlier when I said we have to allow, the seller to hear us and listen to us and take action and teach them how to help themselves, this is just helping them help themselves. Because the seller truly wants to sell the house. They just don't want to feel stupid about selling the house or the value which they sold it for. But when I bought the house from the Superior Court judge and he said, Mike, I know you're gonna make $60,000 on this house. I said, Your Honor, I am. I made, I think it was 72. I made more on the house than I paid for the house. Now he was he was an intelligent person who knew in advance I was going to make what I was going to make. So I learned that if really smart people are willing to sell me their house at a discount, and everybody else is too, it's a great thing. It's a good thing, and we just have to present our program in a way that's for them to say yes, and then honor everything we said we were going to do. Nothing worse than saying, I'm going to call you back because that's a great question. After I buy your house today and we agree on a price, I'll call you back and give you that information. We have to follow through with what we said we were going to do because our relationship doesn't stop at the sale of their house or us buying it. It goes on and on and on and on and on. I can't tell you how many houses I've bought because someone said, call Mike. And
well, I think, don't you think once you get that whole, if you do your job right, you will establish the whole know, like, and trust factor. And then once you've managed to do that and you realize that you are there to solve a problem, we're all in the problem-solving business, which means we're automatically in the people business.
Right.
Once you can grasp that you're really there to provide a service, and you can move that seller down the path so that if they need something else, if they need you to pay for everything, take care of a lien on the house, whatever it is they need, if they need the house cleaned out, maybe in a probate, if you can solve their problem, then you can buy a house and it won't be based solely on price, but you have to find out what it is they want.
There's I remember I met this nice lady. It was an absentee owned house. It wasn't being occupied. It had been occupied recently. And she asked to meet me out at the property to show me the house. And so I was there my earliness so I could interview the neighbors and all that kind of stuff. And she was on time. And so I was out of my car already. She got out of her car. She says, let me apologize. The house is horribly filthy. And boy, if I didn't hear that, I could have just went right over my head. But the seller, the first thing out of her mouth was, I have to apologize for my house that's horribly, condition kind of. And people will tell us. We just have to listen, and we have to listen to why they want to sell. What is it about it? And the house, by the way, was horrible. But I've learned that the worse it smells, the more money I make.
The smell of money.
Yeah, the worst house I ever bought had a double homicide, and and the bodies were left there long enough for that. On TV you always see the people covering their nose because they're depicting something smelling. It really does smell. It smells horrible. And but I've bought a lot of houses where people didn't die that smelled really bad too. And I've bought houses from all kinds of different things, all kinds of different people, all kinds of different ethnic backgrounds, educational backgrounds, everything. The reality is the common denominator is they need to sell their house. I mean, it's when that light bulb goes on for an investor that, oh, wait a second, I'm there to buy a house. That's why I'm here. Then everything else is easier, and just start communicating and finding out who the seller is. And we have to negotiate, because if you were as a seller, if I wanted to buy your house at $70,000 and it was worth $100 and you were stuck on $80, I have to negotiate with you to get you from 70 to 80. So if all those things that I said to you about why my program's great, if that didn't get you to 70 on its own, which a lot of times it will, if you do it on purpose and in a certain order kind of thing, then I still have to ask you some negotiation questions. And that's where some investors will say, well, I don't want to be that person. That's not me. I want to be more friendly. Well, you can do it in a friendly manner. Negotiation isn't like I have a baseball bat in my hand. It's a very fair communication. And when you start negotiating with people, there's a lot of storytelling that goes on because you have to describe yourself. And if I say, well, like brown, well, what is brown? Well, brown is like, you imagine UPS brown. That's the best brown color in my mind. If I just said brown, someone might think tan. So if I start negotiating with people and I start using stories that are relevant to them and factual, so they can relate to it, it's a true story. It's not a fake story. Because if it's a fake story, you can't remember it to tell it again, and you don't want to get caught doing that. So it's factual, it's relevant, they can understand it, and you start negotiating. That's why when people go on strike and you hear on the news, well, they've been in negotiation for 3 weeks. They're not in negotiation like hammering each other for 3 weeks. They're telling stories. They're getting both sides to relate to who they are. And when you can get both sides to relate to who you are and why you need what you need, then walls start coming down and common sense rises up. And so the seller, because the biggest one that everybody always says, all the sellers says, well, I want $80,000. And I've asked them, is that the best you can do? Can you see yourself doing better? Is that the lowest you go? And all the takeaway closes, but they'll come back and that's what I want. And I'll laugh at me when you hear this, but can we role play a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So Sharon, who's your favorite actor?
Oh,
the most favorite actor in your entire life?
That's a tough one. Probably Robert Redford or Paul Newman.
Robert Redford?
Mm-hmm.
Are you serious?
Serious.
Wasn't he? Well, gosh, I can think of the movie that he was just in. Although he was in that movie with Demi Moore, right, where he was a really rich guy and oh gosh, what was the guy's actor? What's his name that was in that with them? It was the guy that was on Cheers, I think, for the longest time. Woody Harrelson was in that.
Woody Harrelson.
Robert Redford? Wow. He's actually a pretty good actor. Yeah. I can see that. Huh. You know who my favorite actor is?
Who's your favorite actor?
Now, I got to tell you, it's not because he's a great actor. I mean, he's an okay actor. He acts a lot, but Brad Pitt. You've got think about it. I mean, Brad Pitt, no. I know he's not Robert Redford. He's not Robert Redford. But you know why I like Brad?
Why?
Nothing to do with his acting. But I just think Angelina Jolie is just gorgeous.
I knew you were going to say that.
And I would love to be Brad Pitt just to spend a day with Angelina Jolie. I mean, I'd want to do that. But you know what?
What?
I'm not Brad Pitt. I can want to be Brad Pitt. I can need to be Brad Pitt. But I looked in the mirror this morning and Brad wasn't there. It's just me.
It wasn't Brad.
No, and I know, and that's kind of how it is when you tell me you need or want 80,000. I get it. I want to be Brad Pitt, but it doesn't make it real. We went over the numbers earlier, and you saw the numbers and how I determined my value, and you said those were reasonable, and you kind of agreed that those were reasonable. And I understand you wanted 80, but that's not a real number. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So if it's storytelling, you get your point across by taking them out of the negotiation. Because what do the movies have to do with real estate?
Not a thing.
Not a thing. But you know what? I've asked that question from a lot of people, and there's not a single actor that someone has said that I didn't know about. Because no one picks like that actor you've never heard of. Kind of
right.
thing.
They pick somebody famous.
There's like a dozen of them, and if you know the dozen of them, you can figure it out. But what it does is it makes them comfortable because, man, they're like, I want 80, he only wants to give me 70, and they're so uptight. Let them relax. Let's have some laughter. I don't know if you noticed, but in my voice, I was like praising you. It was happy. I was getting you excited, and then it went really somber to, I'm not Brad Pitt. Just like, I know you want 80, but it's not real. And when you slow down,
you might be an actor.
When you slow down your tonality and you start telling, I don't know if you heard this, but if you start telling secrets, people listen. They lean in. They start taking note with their brain. It's important. When you shout is important, like fire, But when you start talking softly to someone, boy, they really listen. And then they can
Mhm.
relate it as long as you've told them something they can relate to. Now, if I talked about something, man on the moon had nothing to do with real estate, nothing to do with anything, well, I couldn't have a soft voice and do anything with it. But and I don't know if people will think that this is fake or not, but it's how we communicate.
Mhm.
I mean, it's
Well, I think it is.
it,
I think you have to find some commonality with the people you're speaking to.
it, what I found when I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. There was a time that I didn't understand what receiving something from the seller meant. So I'd be out there, and we'd be at the kitchen table or wherever we were, and someone say, "Mike, you want a beer? You want a Coke? You want a bottled water? You want some tea?" Kind of stuff, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I never
Mhm.
understood what that meant. Well, I knew what it meant. Like, they thought I was thirsty, they were thirsty, they were
Thirsty.
whatever.
Mhm.
That's not what it means at all. Here's what it means. It means I believe you. My guard
Mhm.
just went down because now I am giving you something. I don't know you. I am now allowing you inside of my world, giving you something I own. I'm comfortable with you because we don't, if someone knocks on the door who we don't know, we're not going to, you want a bottle of water? No, we're going to, who are you? Well,
Mhm.
the moment we start feeling comfortable with people and we start relating to them and understanding them and agreeing with them, all that discomfort sheds, and we offer them bottled water. And what a great
So
thing!
let
So,
yeah, let me ask you this. Do you make your offer on the spot then?
oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's just because I'm like the guerrilla investor mentality, and
Mhm.
I'm I'm at the house for one of three things, or actually all three. Or um, I'm there to confirm what I think I know, determine what I don't know, and get a contract signed. And
Okay.
I'm not afraid of going. I can use it as a perfect example. Walked a house with a seller. We agreed on a price. I always tell people I'm going to have my roofing contractor come out, my pest control company come out and do those certifications. Um, the roofing contractor went out there, so we agreed on a price. Roofing contractor came out. He said, "Mike, that roof has to be replaced." Well, I didn't see that. That came, off of left field.
Mhm.
Went back to the seller and had to renegotiate. Well, I could
Mhm.
have, when I was there, said to the seller, "I don't know what the roofing's going to cost me, so I'll have to find that out and get back to you." Well, what I've learned is another guerrilla investor is just going to go in there and get a contract signed, because for me anyway, and it's not for everybody, for me anyway, having a contract, with a contract, now I can do a lot of things. I can buy the house. I can not buy the house. I can make the seller feel so comfortable that they're not going to sell a house to somebody else. I'm not going to lose opportunity. So I get a contract signed. And for the most part, I would say close to 100%. I honor the contract, even if I find something wrong. But I'm not. If something's half the value of the house, I'm not going to continue to buy in the house. It
Mm.
doesn't make sense that way. But so I always get a contract signed. That's why I'm there. And my contract, or my agreement, and I never call it a contract with the seller.
Mhm.
And I use it on those occasions where I know the seller's like on the fence, like they haven't said yes yet, but they haven't said no.
Mhm. Mhm.
My agreement's 9 pages, and so I will ask the seller. I'll say this, and I take 4 copies of my agreement out with me in case they have another property to sell, and I got to leave them a copy, kind of thing. So my seller is on the fence. You can see it. The guy and the gal, or the guy and the guy, or the gal and the gal. They're staring at each other. They're talking with their stares to each other, and their body language. And so I see that. I can tell that they're on the fence of saying yes, they want to, but they're not sure yet. And I've already attempted to say, it sounds like you guys need to talk about it. Let me go out, make a couple phone calls, check in with my office, come back in, and we'll fall forward and agree on a price and buy the house. That didn't work.
Mhm.
So I'll say, let's do this. Let's go over the agreement we're going to use when you sell me your house, which is an embedded command when you sell me your house. And I'll start filling out the agreement. And
Okay.
so it's 9 pages long, but I go over every paragraph. So I thoroughly paraphrase every paragraph so that they feel comfortable, because by the time, when I go into there's a clause that says we can assign the contract. We don't need it in our agreement, but we have it. And I tell them what the seller what that means. There's a clause that says I'm going to make a huge amount of money flipping your house, and I tell them what that means. There's a clause that says I'm a broker, and I tell them what that. There's all kinds of them in 9 pages. But what I have found as I'm filling it out, and I'll have sellers say, "Are you filling it out?" Yeah, I figured, what, we're going to use it. And rather than having to do this twice, might as well do it now. And so we'll go through it. But by the time I get done explaining the contract, and especially explaining the things that don't have to be in the agreement, which are important. Like some investors think that you can't tell a seller that you're going to make a huge amount of money. Well, it's in my contract, and huge is bolded, and it's the big word on the biggest word on the page. And the seller doesn't care how much we make. They just want to sell their house. But when I do that and I explain all the things that I don't have to explain, and most people don't, it's a character building. So when they're done, when I'm done, they can go, oh, this wasn't so hard. He actually said all the things I never thought he would say. He was honest with me. Yeah, honey, let's go ahead and sell this house. Or, Mike, can you see yourself doing, if you could do $2,000 more, you've got a deal. But I allow them to be free and not feel like anything's being hidden from them, because it shouldn't be. We shouldn't hide things from our seller. We'll never get referrals if we do. And allow them to do that. And I just fall forward. And I'm open and honest. And the reason I can be open and honest with a seller is because I have enough opportunity that I can say no, or they can say no. And I'm not afraid of not buying their house. And so some people don't do enough marketing, and that's the only opportunity they have. And so they do everything they can, and they're so nervous and uptight it shows, and no one's going to sign a contract with that person. So I'm not afraid to say no, and I'm not afraid for them to say no, and I'll just go buy another house. And it's not cavalier. It's just being friendly and honest with people.
So when you make your offer to the seller, have you left a little room in there to come up a little bit?
Yeah, they're averages. I mean,
right.
So yes, there's always a little room. Now that little room, if it's eroded 3 littles, well, that's a lot. So I have a little room and everything, and I'm not crazy. If I can make X amount of dollars, and I wanted to make $2,000 more or $5,000 more, whatever my market says I can or have to. Did I say that backwards? If I can't make $5,000 more, I'm going to make $5,000 less, and I'm going to make instead of $50,000, I'll make $45,000, because I do enough of them that they all average out, and so and it's okay. I'm maybe the only person who will ever admit that I've actually paid more for a house than the sellers wanted, but I can distinctly remember telling people, no, I'm not. No, I've got to give you more money, because as human beings, it's not always about how much we can make buying a house, what we can sell it for. We have to look at the person we're buying it from. And the same way that, I'll buy everybody groceries in a grocery store. If I see their situation really needs more money than they're asking for, I have to. And I always get to my number. If I don't ever go below my number, just because I can. And I'm pretty good at negotiation. So I know I can take a seller in most cases further below or more below than what's in my business model. But I don't, because I think it would be shame on me. Just because I can negotiate further doesn't mean I should negotiate further. And, my skin crawls when I hear people going, yeah, I want to get the best price. Well, no, the best price is what your business model says it is, and what is the best price for the seller in those situations where you can tell that the seller needs it. And one of the situations was, I was buying a house from a nurse who was dying, and that's the reason she was selling the house. Well, whether I gave her 10 grand more or not wasn't going to influence me, but it surely would influence her for the rest of her life. And don't you kind of just have to do that stuff?
Yeah, I think you do. I really think you do. You have to do what you feel is morally and ethically right. And when you walk away from the house, even though you're there to make money, you have to feel like you've done the right thing. At least, and I do for sure. So I don't need that feeling, and I don't think you need that feeling either hanging over you.
I always tell people, and my attorney, he got mad at me one day because I said, John, I always answer moral, ethical, and legal in that order. Just because it's legal doesn't make it right. If it's legal, that's because he's an attorney, and that's how they get paid to think that way. But the reality is there's a lot of times I'll go to a house and I know I can buy the house and I know I can buy it at 60 cents on the dollar or 70 cents on the dollar, but there's no reason for the seller to do it. And I just tell them, I've got 3 agents I can refer you to. All 3 of them are great. I would interview all 3 of them, and I would put your house on the multiple listing service, and I'd tell it for as much as you can get in it looks like you can get this value. I tell every seller what their house is worth, Because what I don't want with a seller is, when I say what it's worth, by the way, I mean what the market says they should be able to get,
Right.
not what it would net them when they sold it, kind of thing. So, what it's worth is you have all those costs involved. But I tell people that because I want to be able to look them in the eye later and say, thanks for selling me your house, and do you know anybody that's looking to sell? And know that I did the right thing. And we can't unless we're super, super, super honest. And maybe it's just my stupidness that I would rather be so honest I lose a deal than not honest enough and get a deal.
No, I feel the same way, and I'm the first one to tell a seller, I'm not your best option. I really think you should list your house. Your house doesn't need any repairs. You're not really in a distressed situation, and quite frankly, I'm not sure why they've called me a lot of times, because there really is no reason. So,
and I always let them know that here's my offer, and when you list it, you can reserve my name. So if you decide to go ahead and accept my offer, maybe something else happens in life and you really need to sell, you have my offer, reserve my name, and if real estate conditions haven't changed for me or you, let's do a deal. And that allows me to buy a listed house that I've seen before the agent listed it. But I just think that's the right thing. And you can kind of weed those people out before you get there, but some will still show up when you knock on the door. And it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, I think it's important that you leave the door open, that you leave with grace, you wish them well. And I'll tell people, I really hope you sell your house, but if for whatever reason things don't turn out the way you hope they will, then I'd love to be your plan B, and here's my card. So,
and sometimes, and I have found, I guess it's because I've bought so many freaking houses in life, but when we're at that sticking point and they can't say yes, and we're not sure why they can't say yes, but they're not saying yes. They're not saying no, but they're not saying yes. I have found, go get in your car, drive away, and about 5 minutes later call them and go, you know what? I just feel like maybe you guys did want to sell me your house. And maybe I didn't explain myself right. I apologize. Is there anything that I didn't explain? And that will have given them enough time to talk to each other or think about everything you said. And some of those people, if you just make that one simple phone call, will say, yeah, can you come up $5,000? Which is them coming down $5,000 kind of thing. And turn around and go get a contract signed. And so we should never close the door and close it for good.
Now, let me ask you this. We've gone a long time here, but I want to ask you, if you absolutely cannot make a deal, what is your follow-up procedure? Because, time and circumstances change everything. And sometimes you just get the feeling that, that they're not going to get the price that they want for that house. So we've kind of left the door open. We've been nice and we've done all that. But what is your procedure for following up with these people, maybe in weeks or months down the road?
Well, they're going to get that letter from me, the questionnaire.
Your survey.
Right. But I'm going to keep them on my list. So I don't ever take people off my list, even if I see them or I buy their house, because it's not cost effective for me to. So they're going to still get that letter from me in 3 weeks or in 4 weeks. And they're going to get another one in 60 days and another one in in my case, I mail that every 3 weeks. So I'm going to still remind them I'm there. The same way I would remind them I was there if I hadn't gone out and said hello to them. And for me, because I buy enough houses and have enough opportunity, it works okay. I have, we have customers that they make more money or do more deals by them self-directing the follow-up, meaning they'll cold call them back or warm call them back, and they'll email them and they'll do all those things. I don't do any of those things because I know my machine that does what it does for me works really well, and I like it. It works for me. I have enough opportunity. I don't have to build and create relationships with sellers. Where some people they love doing that. I want to go out and buy a house, and I'm polite about it, and I'm friendly about it, and my marketing system stays in place, and I recycle my list every 6 months, and so the house that I bought will fall off my list because it was sold. New houses will come on the list. Other houses that were sold to other people will fall off, and I just keep the cycle. And a seller that I see today, they'll get another letter from me until they sell to somebody else or don't qualify for me to buy it because they took out a refi or whatever it was. And that's my follow-up. And
yeah, that's my procedure too.
I think it's so simple to keep it that way. And what I have found is I don't want to make a deal. I want the deal to find me and say, Mike, I'm over here. I can't, like, it's not like pottery or whatever it is. You can't like mold it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a deal if it's a deal. We can negotiate the deal, but I can't cookie cutter it and I can't make it into something that it isn't. If it's not a deal, it's not a deal. And I don't want to spend time. I'd rather go get in my swimming pool than spend time on trying to convince the seller why they should sell me a house when they don't want to.
Yeah.
And if I needed more opportunity, I'd send out more mail. And if my market didn't have enough people to send out mail to, I'd go to another market. Or I would step back and say, well, I can only buy 15 houses a year, but I want to buy 30. What do I need to do? Well, buy 15 and just make twice as much. It's a lot less work. And we all arrive at the point when we are successful investors where we know there's enough opportunity at a larger spread, and we wait for it. When we don't know that, we pick the unripe fruit and we whatever we do to it and to make it right. But if we just wait for deals to come to us, and I don't mean like not do anything and wait, but
right.
But don't make it something that's not a deal into a deal, and wait for the ones that are a deal to knock on our door, and be the first one there. I always tell people, man, if that phone rings, you have to make them feel like you're a pizza company. Like if I called Domino's and Domino's said I'm out of cheese and I wanted a pizza, well, I'm calling Pizza Hut. But most investors act like Domino's that's out of cheese. They don't call them back. They don't, And if we create urgency in the mind of a seller, they'll stop calling our competition. And our competition are lenders who refi, realtors who sell, and other investors who buy. And the moment I've told a seller, what time tomorrow, 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, should I come out and buy your house? And I've said that on the phone, and I've said it different ways over and over again. They know at 2 o'clock tomorrow, their house is sold. So they stop calling.
That's a really great way to put it. And I think that's definitely a sentence that everybody needs to put into their pitch, so to speak, because I'll bet you that most people are saying, what time should I come out and look at your house, 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock? And the sellers are even saying to you, what time can you come look at my house? So it's a whole different mindset. That's something important to think about. So do you have some tips for folks, some best tips for folks that are
start? It's almost impossible to go on a diet holding a pizza kind of thing. So you have to put the pizza down and decide to begin. And that's one of the hardest things. But once you begin, you have to do things on purpose. So whatever those things on purpose are for you or for them, maybe that's, well, I can't afford to do direct mail, but I want to market, so I'm going to get 1,000 business cards, and I'm going to write a list of all my friends and everybody I know and everybody that knows me, and I'm going to divide that list by 22, and that's how many people a day that I'm going to hand business cards to or call, and then I'm going to hand business cards to other people. You're just doing something. You're doing something positive to create wealth. When you show up early. On time is late. When you show up, make sure that you're ready and prepared to buy a house. I mean, it's amazing that people who want to buy something aren't ready to buy it. So when I always say, take contracts with you, take business cards with you, take your camera with you, or your cell phone with a camera, or take your measuring tape, your clipboard, all those things. But here's what you don't want to take. You don't want to take trash in your vehicle, because these sellers, when they decide to sell us a house, whether they've signed our contract or not, or agreement, they will walk us out to our car. And they will look inside, and everything you just told them about yourself will fade away because they see all the trash in your vehicle. Don't park in front of their house. Always park across the street. Have it sold before you buy it, but not actually sold. So do some research on what sells and how you're going to sell it, and understand for me anyway, I know what the point of contract, how many days have to be eliminated before I get a check in my hand, and know that number, and you have your business model around that one. But it's the key to I think success is whether you know and understand negotiation or agreements and communication skills, everybody will be successful. The issue is most people, one, physically can't do enough marketing or economically can't do enough marketing. But, the nice thing is you just have to do a bunch of it, and someone will call you. And maybe the last thing I'll say is I know that as much as I know, a brand new investor can go out to the same house that I went out to, say the exact same things I said or something different, and get a contract that I would never be able to get because of who they are and who they are impacted and influenced. The seller, where who I am and what I have to offer didn't impact them as well. So people that are getting started or have never gotten started and want to, just know that you don't have to be a superstar already to buy houses. You can be brand spanking, never done it before, as long as you don't have that attitude, and go out and get a contract signed where someone that's bought a bucket load of houses can't. And I think when you know that, it will help set you free to go out and just do it. And so...
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.